Hello and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we continue our reading of Rewards and Fairies by Rudyard Kipling. Edie's Service. Edie, priest of St. Wilfrid in the chapel at Manhood End, ordered a midnight service for such as cared to attend. But the Saxons were keeping Christmas, and the night was stormy as well. Nobody came to the service, though Edie rang the bell. "Wicked weather for walking," said Edie of Manhood End, "but I must go on with the service for such as care to attend." The altar candles were lighted. An old marsh donkey came, bold as a guest invited, and stared at the guttering flame. The storm beat on the windows, the water splashed on the floor, and a wet, yoke-weary bullock pushed in through the open door. "How do I know what is greatest? How do I know what is least? That is my Father's business," said Edie, Wilfrid's priest. "But three are gathered together. Listen to me and attend. I bring good news, my brethren," said Edie of Manhood End. And he told the ox of a manger and a stall in Bethlehem, and he spoke to the ass of a rider that rode to Jerusalem. They steamed and dripped in the chancel, they listened and never stirred, while just as though they were bishops, Edie preached them the word, till the gale blew off the marches, and the windows showed the day, and the ox and the ass together wheeled and clattered away. And when the Saxons mocked him, said Edie of Manhood End, "I dare not shut his chapel on such as care to attend." The Conversion of St. Wilfrid. They had bought peppermints up at the village and were coming home past little St. Barnabas Church when they saw Jimmy Kidbrooke, the carpenter's baby, kicking at the churchyard gate with a shaving in his mouth and tears running down his cheeks. Una pulled out the shaving and put in a peppermint. Jimmy said he was looking for his granddaddy. He never seemed to take much notice of his father, so they went up between the old graves under the leaf-dropping limes to the porch where Jim trotted in, looked about the empty church, and screamed like a gate hinge. Young Sam Kidbrooke's voice came up from the bell tower and made them jump. "Why, Jimmy," he called, "what are you doing here? Fetch him, father." Old Mr. Kidbrooke stumped downstairs, jerked Jimmy onto his shoulder, stared at the children beneath his brass spectacles, and stumped back again. They laughed. It was so exactly like Mr. Kidbrooke. "It's all right," Una called up the stairs. "We found him, Sam. Does his mother know?" "He'll come off by himself. She'll be just about crazy," Sam answered. "Then I'll run down the street and tell her." Una darted off. "Thank you, Miss Una. Would you like to see how we're mending the bell beams, Mr. Dan?" Dan hopped up and saw young Sam lying on his stomach in a most delightful place among beams and ropes close to the 5 great bells. Old Mr. Kidbrooke on the floor beneath was planing a piece of wood, and Jimmy was eating the shavings as fast as they came away. He never looked at Jimmy. Jimmy never stopped eating, and the broad gilt-bobbed pendulum of the church clock never stopped swinging across the whitewashed wall of the tower. Dan winked through the sawdust that fell on his upturned face. "Ring a bell," he called. "Mustn't do that, but I'll buzz one of 'em a bit for you," said Sam. He pounded on the sound bow of the biggest bell and waked a hollow, groaning boom that rang up and down the tower like creepy feelings down your back. Just when it almost began to hurt, it died away in a hurry of beautiful, sorrowful cries, like a wine-glass rubbed with a wet finger. The pendulum clanked, one loud clank to each silent swing. Dan heard Una return from Mrs. Kidbrooke's and ran down to fetch her. She was standing by the font, staring at someone who kneeled at the altar rail. "Is that the lady who practices the organ?" she whispered. "No, she's gone into the organ place. Besides, she wears black," Dan replied. The figure rose and came down the nave. It was a white-haired man in a long white gown with a sort of scarf looped low on the neck, one end hanging over his shoulder. His loose, long sleeves were embroidered with gold, and a deep strip of gold embroidery waved and sparkled round the hem of his gown. "Go and meet him," said Puck's voice from behind the font. "It's only Wilfrid." Wilfrid who? Said Dan. You come along too. Wilfrid, Saint of Sussex, and Archbishop of York. I shall wait till he asks me. He waved them forward. Their feet squeaked on the old grave slabs in the center aisle. The Archbishop raised one hand with a pink ring on it and said something in Latin. He was very handsome, and his thin face looked almost as silvery as his thin circle of hair. Are you alone? He asked. Puck's here, of course, said Una. Do you know him? I know him better now than I used to. He beckoned over Dan's shoulder and spoke again in Latin. Puck pattered forward, holding himself as straight as an arrow. The Archbishop smiled. Be welcome, he said. Be very welcome. Welcome to you also, O Prince of the Church, Puck replied. The Archbishop bowed his head and passed on, till he glimmered like a white moth in the shadow of the font. He does look awfully princely, said Una. Isn't he coming back? Oh, yes, he's only looking over the church. He's very fond of churches, said Puck. What's that? The lady who practices the organ was speaking to the blower boy behind the organ screen. Well, we can't very well talk here, Puck whispered. Let's go to Panama Corner. He led them to the end of the south aisle, where there is a slab of iron which says in queer, long-tailed letters, Orate Panama Johanne Colline. The children always called it Panama Corner. The Archbishop moved slowly about the little church, peering at the old memorial tablets and the new glass windows. The lady who practices the organ began to pull out stops and rustle hymn books behind the screen. I hope she'll do all the soft, lacy tunes, like Treacle on Porridge, said Una. I like the trumpety ones best, said Dan. Oh, look at Wilfrid. He's trying to shut the altar gates. Tell him he mustn't, said Puck quite seriously. He can't anyhow, Dan muttered, and tiptoed out of Panama Corner, while the Archbishop patted and patted at the carved gates that always sprang open again beneath his hand. That's no use, sir, Dan whispered. Old Mr. Kidbrooke says altar gates are just the one pair of gates which no man can shut. He made 'em so himself. The Archbishop's blue eyes twinkled. Dan saw that he knew all about it. I beg your pardon, Dan stammered, very angry with Puck. Yes, I know. He made them so himself. The Archbishop smiled and crossed to Panama Corner, where Una dragged up a certain padded armchair for him to sit on. The organ played softly. What does that music say? He asked. Una dropped into the chant without thinking. O all ye works of the Lord, bless ye the Lord, praise him and magnify him forever. We call it the Noah's Ark because it's all lists of things, beasts and birds and whales, you know. Whales? Said the Archbishop quickly. Yes, O ye whales and all that move in the waters, Una hummed, bless ye the Lord. It sounds like a wave turning over, doesn't it? Holy Father, said Puck with demure face, is a little seal also one who moves in the waters? Oh, yes, yes, he laughed. A seal moves wonderfully in the waters. Do the seals come to my island still? Puck shook his head. All those little islands have been swept away. Very possible. The tides ran fiercely down there. Do you know the land of the seal calf, maiden? No, but we've seen seals at Brighton. The Archbishop is thinking of a little further down the coast. He means Seal's Eye. Selsey, down Chichester way, where he converted the South Saxons, Puck explained. Yes, yes, if the South Saxons did not convert me, said the Archbishop, smiling. The first time I was wrecked was on that coast. As our ship took ground and we tried to push her off, an old fat fellow, I remember, reared breast high out of the water and scratched his head with his flipper, as if he were saying, what does that respectable person with the pole think he is doing? I was very wet and miserable, but I could not help laughing till the natives came down and attacked us. What did you do? Dan asked. One couldn't very well go back to France, so one tried to make them go back to the shore. All the South Saxons are born wreckers, like my own Northumbrian folk. I was bringing over a few things from my old church at York, and some of the natives laid hands on them, and I'm afraid I lost my temper. It is said, said Puck, wickedly meek, that there was a great fight. I must have been a silly lad," Wilfrid spoke with a sudden thick burr in his voice. He coughed and took up his silvery tones again. "There was no fight, really. My men thumped a few of them, but the tide rose half an hour before its time with a strong wind, and we backed off. What I wanted to say, though, was that the seas about us were full of sleek seals watching the scuffle. My good Edie, my chaplain, insisted that they were demons. Yes, that was my first acquaintance with the South Saxons and their seals." "But not the only time you were wrecked, was it?" said Dan. "Alas, no. On sea and land my life seems to have been one long shipwreck." He looked at the Joan Colleen slab as old Hobden sometimes looks into the fire. "Ah, well." "But did you ever have any more adventures among the seals?" asked Una after a pause. "Oh, the seals. I beg your pardon. They're the important things. Yes, I went back to the South Saxons after 15 years. No, I did not come by water, but overland from my own Northumbria to see what I could do. It's little one can do with that class of native except to stop them killing each other and themselves." "Why did they kill themselves?" asked Una, chin in her hand. "Because they were heathen. When they grew tired of life, as if they were the only people, they would jump into the sea. They called it going to Wotan. It wasn't want of food always, by any means. A man would tell you that he felt gray in the heart, or a woman would say that she saw nothing but long days in front of her, and they'd saunter away to the mud flats, and that would be the end of them, poor souls, unless one headed them off. One had to run quick, but one can't allow people to lay hands on themselves just because they happen to feel gray. Yes, extraordinary people, the South Saxons. Disheartening sometimes." "What does that say now?" The organ had changed tune again. "Only a hymn for next Sunday," said Una. "The church's one foundation. Go on, please, about running over the mud. I should like to have seen you." "I dare say you would, and I really could run in those days. Ethelwalk, the king, gave me some 5 or 6 muddy parishes by the sea, and the first time my good Edie and I rode there, we saw a man slouching along the slob among the seals at Manhood End. My good Edie disliked seals, but he swallowed his objections and ran like a hare." "Why?" said Dan. "For the same reason that I did. We thought it was one of our people going to drown himself. As a matter of fact, Edie and I were nearly drowned in the pools before we overtook him. To cut a long story short, we found ourselves very muddy, very breathless, being quite quietly made fun of in good Latin by a very well-spoken person. No, he'd no idea of going to Wotan. He was fishing on his own beaches, and he showed us the beacons and turf heaps that divided his land from the church property. He took us to his own house, gave us a good dinner, some more than good wine, sent a guide with us into Chichester, and became one of my best and most refreshing friends. He was a Meon by descent, from the west edge of the kingdom, a scholar, educated curiously enough at Lyon, my old school, had traveled the world over, even to Rome, and was a brilliant talker. We found he had scores of acquaintances in common. It seems he was a small chief under King Ethelwalk. I fancy the king was somewhat afraid of him. The South Saxons mistrust a man who talks too well. Now I've left out the very point of my story. He kept a great gray-muzzled old dog seal that he had brought up from a pup. He called it Padda, after one of my clergy. It was rather like fat, honest old Padda. The creature followed him everywhere and nearly knocked down my good Edie when we first met him. Edie loathed it. It used to sniff at his thin legs and cough at him. I can't say I ever took much notice of it. I was not fond of animals. Still, one day Edie came to me with a circumstantial account of some witchcraft that Meon worked. He would tell the seal to go down to the beach the last thing at night and bring him word of the weather. When it came back, Meon might say to his slaves, "Padda thinks we shall have wind tomorrow, haul up the boats." I spoke to Meon casually about the story, and he laughed. He told me he could judge by the look of the creature's coat and the way it sniffed what weather was brewing. Quite possible. One need not put down everything one does not understand to the work of bad spirits. Or good ones, for that matter. He nodded toward Puck, who nodded gaily in return. I say so, he went on, because to a certain extent I have been made a victim of that habit of mind. Some while after I was settled at Selsey, King Ethelwalk and Queen Ebba ordered their people to be baptized. I fear I'm too old to believe that a whole nation can change its heart at the king's command, and I had a shrewd suspicion that their real motive was to get a good harvest. No rain had fallen for 2 or 3 years, but as soon as we had finished baptizing, it fell heavily, and they all said it was a miracle. And was it? Dan asked. Everything in life is a miracle, but, the bishop twisted the heavy ring on his finger, I should be slow, very slow should I be, to assume that a certain sort of miracle happens whenever lazy and improvident people say they are going to turn over a new leaf if they are paid for it. My friend Meon had sent his slaves to the font, but he had not come himself, so the next time I rode over to return a manuscript, I took the liberty of asking why. He was perfectly open about it. He looked on the king's action as a heathen attempt to curry favor with the Christians' God through me, the archbishop, and he would have none of it. My dear man, I said, admitting that this is the case, surely you as an educated person don't believe in Wotan and all the other hobgoblins any more than Padda here. The old seal was hunched up on his ox-hide behind his master's chair. Even if I don't, he said, why should I insult the memory of my father's gods? I've sent you 103 of my rascals to christen. Isn't that enough? By no means, I answered. I want you. He wants us. What do you think of that, Padda? He pulled the seal's whiskers till it threw back its head and roared, and he pretended to interpret. No, Padda says he won't be baptized yet a while. He says you'll stay to dinner and come fishing with me tomorrow because you're overworked and need a rest. I wish you'd keep yon brute in its proper place, I said, and Edie, my chaplain, agreed. I do, said Meon. I keep him just next my heart. He can't tell a lie, and he doesn't know how to love anyone except me. It'd be the same if I were dying on a mud bank, wouldn't it, Padda? Said Padda, and put up his head to be scratched. Then Meon began to tease Edie. Padda says if Edie saw his archbishop dying on a mud bank, Edie would tuck in his ground and run. Padda knows Edie can run too. Padda came to Withering Church last Sunday, all wet, to hear the music, and Edie ran out. My good Edie rubbed his hands and shins together and flushed. Padda is a child of the devil who is the father of lies, he cried, and begged my pardon for having spoken. I forgave him. Yes, you were just about stupid enough for a musician, said Meon, but here he is. Sing a hymn to him and see if he can stand it. You'll find my small harp beside the fireplace. Edie, who is really an excellent musician, played and sang for quite half an hour. Padda shuffled off his ox-hide, hunched himself on his flippers before him, and listened with his head thrown back. Yes, rather a funny sight. Meon tried not to laugh and asked if Edie were satisfied. It takes some time to get an idea out of good Edie's head. He looked at me. Do you want to sprinkle him with holy water and see if he flies up the chimney? Why not baptize him? Said Meon. Edie was really shocked, and I thought it was bad taste myself. That's not fair, said Meon. You call him a demon and a familiar spirit because he loves his master and likes music, and when I offer you a chance to prove it, you won't take it. Look here, I'll make a bargain. I'll be baptized if you'll baptize Padda too. He's more of a man than most of my slaves. One doesn't bargain or joke about these matters, I said. He was going altogether too far. Quite right, said Meon. I shouldn't like anyone to joke about Padda. Padda, go down to the beach and bring us tomorrow's weather. My good Edie must have been a little overtired with his day's work. I am a servant of the church, he cried. My business is to save souls, not enter into fellowship and understanding with accursed beasts. Have it your own way, said Meon. Padda, you needn't go. The old fellow flounced back to his ox-hide at once. Man could learn obedience at least from that creature, said Edie, a little ashamed of himself. Christians should not curse. Don't you begin to apologize just when I'm beginning to like you, said Meon. We'll leave Padda behind tomorrow, out of respect to your feelings. Now, let's go to supper. We must be up early tomorrow for the whiting. The next was a beautiful, crisp autumn morning, a weather breeder, if I had taken the trouble to think. but it's refreshing to escape from kings and converts for half a day. We three went by ourselves to Meon's smallest boat, and we got on the whiting near an old wreck a mile or so offshore. Meon knew the marks to a yard, and the fish were keen. Yes, yes, perfect morning fishing. If a bishop can't be a fisherman, who can? He twiddled his ring again. We stayed there a little too long, and while we were getting up our stone, down came the fog. After some discussion, we decided to row for the land. The ebb was just beginning to make round the point and set us all ways at once around like a coracle. Selsey Bill, said Puck under his breath, the tides run something furious there. I believe you, said the Archbishop. Meon and I have spent a good many evenings arguing as to where exactly we drifted. All I know is we found ourselves in a little rocky cove that had sprung up around us out of the fog, and a swell lifted the boat onto a ledge, and she broke up beneath our feet. We had just time to shuffle through the weed before the next wave. The sea was rising. It's rather a pity we didn't let Padda go down to the beach last night, said Meon. He might have warned us this was coming. Better to fall into the hands of God than the hands of demons, said Edie, and his teeth chattered as he prayed. A northwest breeze had just got up, distinctly cool. Save what you can of the boat, said Meon. We may need it. We had to drench ourselves again, fishing out stray planks. What for? Said Dan. For firewood. We did not know when we should get off. Edie had flint and steel, and we found dry fuel in an old gull's nest and lit a fire. It smoked abominably, and we guarded it with board planks upended between the rocks. One gets used to that sort of thing if one travels. Unluckily, I'm not as strong as I was. I fear I must have been a trouble to my friends. It was blowing a full gale before midnight. Edie wrung out his cloak and tried to wrap me in it, but I ordered him on his obedience to keep it. However, he held me in his arms all the first night, and Meon begged his pardon for what he'd said the night before about Edie running away, if he found me on the sandbank, you remember. You were right in half your prophecy, said Edie. I have tucked up my gown at any rate. The wind had blown it over his head. Now let us thank God for his mercies. Said Meon. If this gale lasts, we stand a very fair chance of dying of starvation. If it be God's will that we live, God will provide, said Edie. At least help me to sing to him. The wind almost whipped the words out of his mouth, but he braced himself against a rock and sang psalms. I am glad I never concealed my opinion from myself that Edie was a better man than I. Yet I have worked hard in my time, very hard, yes. So the morning and the evening were our second day on that island. There was rainwater in the rock pools, and as a churchman I knew how to fast, but I admit we were hungry. Meon fed our fire chip by chip to eke it out, and they made me sit over it, the dear fellows, when I was too weak to object. Meon held me in his arms the second night just like a child. My good Edie was a little out of his senses, and imagined himself teaching a York choir to sing. Even so, he was beautifully patient with them. I heard Meon whisper, If this keeps up, we shall go to our gods. I wonder what Wotan will say to me. He must know I don't believe in him. On the other hand, I can't do what Ethelwalch finds so easy, curry favor with your god at the last minute in the hope of being saved, as you call it. How do you advise, Bishop? My dear man, I said, if that is your honest belief, I take it upon myself to say you had far better not curry favor with any god. But if it's only your Utish pride that holds you back, lift me up and I'll baptize you even now. Lie still, said Meon. I could judge better if I were in my own hall. But to desert one's father's gods, even if one doesn't believe in them, in the middle of a gale, isn't quite... What would you do yourself? I was lying in his arms, kept alive by the warmth of his big, steady heart. It did not seem to me the time or place for subtle arguments, so I answered, No, I certainly should not desert my God. I don't see now what else I could have said. Thank you. I'll remember that if I live, said Meon, and I must have drifted back to my dreams about Northumbria and beautiful France, for it was broad daylight when I heard him calling on Wotan and that high, shaking heathen yell that I detest so. Lie quiet. I'm giving Wotan his chance, he said. Our dear Edie ambled up, still beating time to his imaginary choir. Yes, call on your gods, he cried, and see what gifts they will send you. They are gone on a journey, or they are hunting. I assure you the words were not out of my mouth when old Padda shot from the top of a cold, wrinkled swell, drove himself over the weedy ledge, and landed fair in our laps with a rock cod between his teeth. I could not help smiling at Edie's face. A miracle, he cried, and kneeled down to clean the cod. And we'll find out more how Padda saves the bishop and his friends next time.